Introduction. In this session, we are about to discuss substance abuse and prostitution. These are very common terms and we've heard them so many times. These two issues have been affecting our lives to a greater extent and have become a great cause of concern in our society. What is substance abuse? Substance abuse is also called as drug abuse. Intake of any types of drugs is regarded as substance abuse. India alone reports 3 million cases of individuals engaged in drug abuse. Over the years, drug addiction has become a concern for India. The reason for this is the increasing rate of drug abuse cases. It is considered a social taboo. One of the major causes for this is globalization and urbanization. The change in the type of family system from big joint families to small nuclear families is also a major contributing factor for the increase in drug addiction. In the first half of this session, we will deal with substance abuse and its nature. We will also understand the laws against drug abuse. We will then discuss some facts about various types of drugs available. We will discuss the nature of these different types of drugs and learn the effects of drug abuse. In the later half, we will discuss prostitution, where we will deal with the nature of prostitution and discuss the remedies for preventing prostitution. Substance or drug abuse. What is drug? Any substance that influences our body or emotions when consumed is called drugs. That is why it's also called substance. It can also change the way your mind thinks. These can be medicinal substances or even non-medicinal substances. Some drugs can cause serious issues when it is used without proper prescription or used for a long period of time or even used for reasons other than medical. When we talk about drugs, we deal with drugs that are non-medicinal in nature. Some drugs are labeled illegal, like heroin. Let us now differentiate between the terms drug use and drug abuse. Using drugs to heal one's body is called drug use. Using drugs to harm one's body is called drug abuse. Drug use does not usually affect the mental or physical health of the person, but drug abuse affects the physical and mental health of the person. Let's talk about addiction. Addiction is a feeling to possess something and have it with you constantly. When we talk about drug addiction, we refer to the urge to constantly consume drugs. It gives rise to two emotions, intolerance and dependence. Tolerance in the case of drug abuse is termed as the urge to have large quantities at very frequent intervals. Dependence can be termed in drug abuse as the individual feeling dependent to drugs for physical and mental stability. Drugs like cannabis produces psychological dependence, whereas drugs like opium and heroin cause both psychological and physical dependence. The Constitution of India directs the state to regard the rising of the loss of nutrition and standard of living of its people in Article 47 and the improvement of public health as among its primary duties and to endeavor to enforce prohibition on intoxicating drinks and drugs which are injurious to health. The Narcotic Drugs and Psychotropic Substances Act, Section 91, directs the government to establish cantors for identification and treatment of addicts and supply of narcotic drugs and psychotropic substances, and also look at the treatment possible, education, aftercare, rehabilitation, and social integration of addicts. The government may also provide for the establishment, appointment, maintenance, and management and supervision of appointments, training, powers, duties, and personnel employed in such centers. The government has tackled the issues related to drugs through its two-pronged strategy of supply reduction and demand reduction. Supply reduction is under the supervision of the enforcement agencies of the Department of Revenue. Demand reduction, however, comes under the domain of social sector and the Ministry of Social Justice and Empowerment, Government of India. There was also this urgent need for implementing strategies for prevention of drug abuse. creating awareness among the public about the ill effects of drug addiction and rehabilitation of addicts. The recent UN documents have stated demand strategies and urged all the member states to take immediate steps to control the demand for consumption of illicit drugs. There are also indications of a relationship between drug abuse and the socio-economic conditions of the population. So it is necessary to recognize drug abuse as a psycho-socio problem, which is also medical in nature and can be tackled better through community-based interventions. The Government of India later adopted a threat-pronged strategy for demand reduction. They are 1. Building awareness and educating people about the ill effects of drug abuse. 2. Dealing with the addicts through motivational counseling, treatment and follow-up. And 3. Social reintegration. To impart drug abuse prevention, rehabilitation training to volunteers to develop an educated cadre of service providers. The government has established a National Center for Drug Abuse Prevention under the patronage of the National Institution of Social Defense in New Delhi to serve as a main center for the country for training, research, and documentation related to drug abuse prevention. Facts about narcotic drugs. As we all know, drug is a substance that affects feeling, thinking, or behavior initially due to chemical reaction in the brain. Alcohol may also be included in this category. Drugs are consumed by eating, smoking, inhaling, sniffing, and drinking, or by injection. Drugs can be broadly classified as 1. Stimulants, 2. Depressants, 3. Hallucinogens, 4. Cannabis, and 5. Opiates. Stimulants are drugs that increase the activity of the brain. Depressants reduce the activity of the brain. Hallucinogens are drugs that alter the way of seeing, hearing, and feeling. Cannabis is drugs like ganja, hashish, and bhang produced from certain plants. Opiates are derived from opium or artificial produced substitutes which have opium-like effects. Stimulants give a feeling of excitement and elation. Amphetamines, the most common in this category, are often used by students and sportsmen to increase alertness and give instant extra energy to participate in sports for long periods. The human body can tolerate large amounts of its intake. Cocaine is the most dangerous stimulant prepared from coca plant in South America. Anxiety, depression, or fainting is a common side effect of cocaine. Tranquilizers, depressants, and sedatives fall in this category as they make the person relaxed and calm. Mandrax, Valium, and Librium are the common drugs in this category. When consumed along with alcohol, it can be fatal. Barbiturates, a chemical found in sleeping pills, is another type of depressant pill. Hallucinogen. We will now discuss hallucinogens. These drugs are often called psychedelic drugs because they make a person see and hear things in a highly detailed but different manner. Experiencing intense emotions and heightened sensation, lack of awareness of time, place, and identity can also occur. LSD is the most common drug in this category. The effect of this drug can last for several days and can even lead to death if not taken with proper medical supervision. Cannabis. These drugs are the most widely used in the world. They are produced from different parts of the cannabis plants. The instant effect of smoking cannabis is a sense of relaxation and a tendency to increase emotions and reduce inhibition. It reduces and eventually destroys one's ability to perform tasks that require concentration and coordination. Opiates. There are three major types of opiates, namely heroin, morphine, and opium itself, which are derived from the poppy plant. Opium, if taken in excess, leads to mental and physical dependence. Morphine is used as a painkiller and can be highly addictive. Pure heroin is more expensive than the other drugs. It can be injected or smoked. Heroin is the most abused drug in India and is highly addictive both physically and psychologically. There are also other artificially produced opiates like methadone and pethidine. In the next section, we shall learn the stages and effects of drug abuse. Stages and effects of drug abuse. Let us start with the stages of drug abuse. There are basically 3 phases in drug abuse: early phase, middle phase, and finally the chronic phase. In the early phase, the amount of drug intake increases as the number of times the drug is consumed. The person spends more money, more time and more thought on drugs than any other activity. In the middle phase, the person gets addicted to the drugs. There is no control over the consumption, and then the individual begins to hide the drugs. The person loses concentration in all areas of life and prefers to stay away from family and friends. In the chronic phase, the person totally loses control over himself to the drug and is constantly under its influence with the possibility of early death. He or she avoids close contact with people and prefers being with other drug-taking individuals. Let us now discuss the effects of drug abuse. First, drugs that cause hallucination, such as LSD, ganja, bhang, are psychologically addictive and lead to fear, anxiety, and insecurity. They alter blood pressure and heart rate. Next are the sedatives such as tranquilizers and barbiturates that induce sleep and provide a calming effect. These depressants relax the central nervous system. Then stimulants such as caffeine and cocaine activate the nervous system and cause tremors, headaches, and hypertension, keeps the person awake and increases alertness. Narcotics like sedatives induce feelings of strength and pleasure, causing loss of weight, insomnia, slow respiration, and nausea. Drugs can have immediate as well as long-term effects on a person. Some powerful drugs such as marijuana can affect short-term memory and cognitive development even if taken occasionally. Some drugs such as cannabis are less harmful as they seem to be, but on a long run they can have intense side effects to the extent of even altering the functions of the brain, liver, and other body organs. Some inhalants, even though not labeled as illegal, are volatile substances present in plant, glue, gasoline, and are also toxic to the sensitive organs of the body such as the kidney, liver, and heart. For the desired physical, emotional, and mental satisfaction, abusers take these drugs, ignoring the physical and mental side effects that can occur because of them. Legal measures have been taken to deal with the rising trend of drug addiction. Narcotic and Psychotropic Substances Act 1985, Prevention of Illicit Traffic in Narcotic Drugs and Psychotropic Substances Act 1988 are some of the legal acts created as measures taken to deal with the problem. With family and peer support and proper counseling, the addict can be guided to adapt new attitude and good moral values. Prostitution. In this section, we are going to discuss prostitution practices. What is prostitution and what are the causes for prostitution? Prostitution is one of the social practices prevalent in our country. Prostitution is legal in some countries, whereas in some others it is illegal. In our country, prostitution is prevalent in many areas. It is considered as one of the corrupt practices in our society. Prostitutes who carry out this kind of work are either forced to do it or sometimes they resort to this kind of work for the sake of money. The prostitute who does these practices might be from poor background or are helpless and need some sexual pleasure from men as well. There are some men who are behind these prostitution practices. They sell women for sexual pleasure and in turn they get money for it. They just use women as tools for sexual pleasure. They create an environment in which all women should be dancing and showing off, and men who came and bought these women for one night or a day or a week. Men who are behind these prostitution practices force women for this kind of work or bribe them with money. Parents from a poor background are made to believe by these persons that it is okay to involve in these practices. These men make promises to the parents saying that their daughters will live happily and will get a lot of money. People from poor backgrounds are often cheated easily, and their daughters are thereafter taken for prostitution. Some men who want sexual pleasure go for these kind of prostitutes. They pay a huge sum of money to these prostitutes and use them for sexual pleasures until they are satisfied. Some men who are married may also go to prostitutes. They may not receive enough sexual pleasure from their wives and hence go outside. Sometimes even small children are taken up for prostitution. In these cases, they are forced by parents into these practices and are kidnapped sometimes by persons who run the practices. Child prostitution is also prevalent in our country. It is really sad to know that such an act is committed by human beings. The reason for this act must be that people still consider women the weaker sex in society, and that is why they are being used by men. These women are usually subjected to physical and mental torture. They have to bear the consequences of brutal acts, and they are usually not given a decent position in society and are always treated as slugs. The society is also to blame as far as these practices are concerned because the social structures encourage them. Simply by not taking action against those involved in these practices, the social structures are indirectly engaging in the same. Sometimes even the rich and the most powerful make use of these prostitutes. Since they have the name and the fame and the position, they think they can do whatever they want and usually do not want to directly indulge in these kind of practices, but they do encourage these practices. Social media like television and movies are also responsible for these practices. The culture of today presents women as exposing. Hence, they provoke the opposite sex. Some social networking sites also upload videos that seduce men to indulge in these kind of practices. These are some of the causes for prostitution in our country. Remedy? Let us discuss some of the remedy or solutions to the problems posed by these practices. First of all, we have to stop the people who are behind these practices and induce some kind of punishment for exercising these practices. Those who run prostitution as a business must be stopped. Next, we have to provide education for women, especially children, create awareness in the society. Those societies where women are considered as weaker sex must promote the women such that they stand up and fight for their right. They should be made to believe that they are not merely tools in the hands of men and fight for equal status as men in the society. Very often, it is the poor that are mainly used for these kind of practices in return for monetary gains. This segment must be given psychological guidance and the confidence to make money other ways, and if they have become victims, must help them to recover from their trauma. Thirdly, society should take steps to abolish prostitution and make these practices as illegal in our country. Government should make a firm stand not to accept bribes from people who are behind prostitution practices, and such persons must also be punished. We must encourage many NGOs who should be handling these problems and taking care of the women and children who are mentally affected because of these practices, so they can recover and come back to normal life into the society. Fourth, we have the social media like television, newspaper, and other media that can create awareness about the effects of prostitution practices. They must stop exposing women and should give women equal status as men. Social networking sites must ban videos that expose women in a bad light. Men who force women for sexual pleasure must also be punished. They are not to use women as a tool for sexual pleasure. Instead, they must know how to respect a woman's right and dignity. Corruption is one of the main reasons for prostitution practices to thrive, and these corrupt people should also be punished by law. Women of today occupy a high place in society as well as at home. They are present in all sorts of fields equal to men. Even in fields of education, women occupy a large place in society today, much more than men. They should stop being considered as one of the weaker sex. Corrupt practices like infanticide, dowry, rape, sexual abuse must be completely abolished from the society, as they are also one of the reasons for prostitution practices. Parents should also provide awareness to their daughters while sending them away from work so they are not fooled by men and are able to provide further education to their children. Prostitution must be stopped and abolished completely from our society. Conclusion. We have discussed substance abuse and prostitution. We began with a description of the worldwide situation on drug abuse. Then we described in detail what drug meant and explained the difference between key concepts like abuse, addiction, dependence, tolerance, and withdrawal. We also understood that drug use can be for healing purposes and drug abuse, though, will cause harm to the individual. Details of different drugs were explained. Physiological, psychological, and socio-cultural causes of drug abuse were then described. We have also discussed about the laws that have been framed to reduce the drug abuse in society. We then discussed prostitution and its existence in the society in detail. We have to believe that only by going to the root cause of prostitution and drug trafficking, the factors that make up the demand, will we be able to end the sexual exploitation and abuse of women and children through prostitution and trafficking. We could greatly reduce the number of victims if the demand was penalized. If there were no men seeking to buy sexual acts, no women and children would be bought and sold. If there were no brothels waiting for victims, no victims would be recruited. If there were no states that profited from the sex trade, then there would be no regulations that facilitated the flow of women from poor towns to the wealthier sex industry centers.